Good morning. My name is Fidel Sáenz de Ormijana. It's my pleasure to be here with our guest, and I should start by thanking the Fundación José Entre Canales Ibarra for hosting this conversation of the Café, entre, Caminos series. And my pleasure is to be here today with Dr. Bob Gilbert. He's a man of many talents. He chairs the civil engineering department at the University of Texas at Austin, actually called the Civil, Architectural, and Environmental Engineering Department. He's a recognized expert in geotechnical engineering. He's the recipient of many honors and awards, and among them the he's a Brunswick Abernathy Professor of Civil Engineering. He has received the Norman Medal from the American Society of Civil Engineers, the E.B. Burnell Award from the American Society of Geologists, and an Outstanding Civilian Service Award from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers because of his work related to the forensic analysis of Hurricane Katrina, which you all have heard of, I'm sure. An internationally recognized expert in geotechnical engineer, in risk analysis and risk management, and I hope to have a very fruitful conversation that we can learn a lot from. And also, I don't want to hide, if you don't mind, that among his many talents is that he's an avid endurance sport practitioner, and we will talk a little bit about that. So, starting with our conversation, tell us a little bit about yourself. I think it's important always to put the person in context. And where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like, Bob?
Yeah, well, thank you, Fidel. And I want to say thank you to you for doing this, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this interview. I grew up in Chicago, a suburb of Chicago, Illinois. I was raised by an engineer, a mining engineer. My father worked for the natural gas company, so he started off working on creating underground caverns to store gas, but then he got an MBA and spent most of his career on the finance side of providing natural gas for the Chicago area. And my mom was also a mathematician. She got an undergraduate degree in 1952 in mathematics from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she was one of the very few women who got a degree. She was a teacher as well, like I am. So I was very lucky. I had wonderful parents who showed me all the great things I could do with science, math, and engineering, and that led me on my path.
Very good, very good. And so, you know, when you went into college, why engineering? Why did you choose engineering?
Well, I actually chose English. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be Ernest Hemingway.
Okay.
And my high school counselor advised me that I could easily get into engineering, and I could always transfer out of engineering to English. But if I went into English and then decided I wanted to be an engineer, it would be very difficult for me to transfer in. So I took their advice, and I was getting a double major in English and engineering for about 3 weeks my first semester, and then I realized that I didn't like reading as many books as I had to read to get a major in English, and so I dropped that part of it.
Okay. But has it served you? Would you say that your background in a completely different field and dealing with language and writing and reading and so on, do you think this has helped you in your later professional life?
Yes, I think a lot of my success is because I've been good at communicating, and because I'm a geotechnical engineer, it requires a lot of creativity, so I think the creativity that I have has served me well as a geotechnical engineer.
Very good. Yes, I think it's important to develop, and I've heard you say this too, you need to develop organically around 360 degrees. You cannot become very good at one single thing and terrible in the rest. So yes, I totally agree. And then, of course, after your Bachelor of Science, you decided to go to graduate school and pursue MS and PhD degrees. And what prompted you to go into the highest levels of education?
Yeah, so I got a master's degree right away from the University of Illinois because I wanted to be a geotechnical engineer, and in the United States you need a master's degree as the entry-level degree in geotechnical engineering. They had a one-year master's, so I got a master's degree, and then I went to work as a consulting engineer for Golder Associates. I was the first employee of their Chicago office, which meant I worked everywhere but Chicago for most of my time there. And I learned more probably in the first 3 weeks in the real world than I learned in any classroom. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity I had to get out and work on real projects, to see how something that looks easy on paper actually gets constructed in the real world, in the field. And that served me well as a teacher. I don't think I could be a very good teacher of engineers if I hadn't practiced and still practice as an engineer.
Yes, I think that duplicates my experience. I think as engineers, we need to be practical, mindful of the practical side of our profession, and I think that having had the actual experience of practicing in the field and in actual projects, it's very important, and Golder Center is a very reputable and well-known firm. So what was the most important thing that you learned, you would say, through your practical side of engineering?
It's all about people.
Okay.
Whether a project succeeds or not is about the people and whether they work together well as a team and whether they trust one another.
Yes, that's good advice. Okay, and then when you graduated with your PhD, you went to work at UT, the University of Texas at Austin. What decided you towards UT, and what has been your experience there a little bit like?
Yeah, so while I was working at Golder, I started to go back to school to get a PhD, so I worked part-time. And I actually went back to work full-time for Golder before the University of Texas called me. It was months. And a professor by the name of Roy Olson, who had worked as a faculty member at the University of Illinois and then in 1970 gone to the University of Texas, called me, and I said I really appreciated his call, but no thanks. I was really happy working, and I was potentially going to open up an office in Lansing, Michigan, and I had my career set. And then he called me back again, and I said, well, it can't hurt to go on an interview, and I've heard good things about Austin, Texas. And I got a PhD because I always wanted to be a teacher. I love teaching. And so I went on the interview, and I bet I wouldn't have gotten the job if I really wanted the job. I think I got the job because I wanted them to show me why I would give up my career and move my family to Austin, Texas and do this. And I was lucky. I was offered the job, I took the job, and I've been there for 32 years now. It's a wonderful institution, as you know, as one of our alumni, one of our distinguished alumni. It's my colleagues are fantastic. The students are great. The university is very well supported. It's producing students that are going all over the world doing great things. So I've been very fortunate to be there.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a great institution, and just like the Caminos UPM that is hosting us today. And interesting. So, let's, one more thing that I would like to explore is we talked about sports earlier. Tell us a little bit about that. What have you learned through sports that, have made you better as a person and an engineer?
Oh, I guess one is it's all about people. When you're on a team, it's the relationship you have with your teammates that is going to make you successful. Even training for something like an Ironman, which my wife and I have done two of, required us to work with lots of other people to learn how to ride a bike for 112 miles and then be able to run a marathon at the end of that. So getting to work with other people and learn from those people and have the support of those people was really important. The other thing is it's so mental. No matter how much training you do or how prepared you are, at some point, if you're running a marathon or doing an Ironman, you're gonna wanna stop. And that mindset of pushing through and realizing that you can get past those feelings is so important.
Yes, I agree 100% with that. I think it's so much about you become your own leader and your own follower, and I think it's very important. Setting goals, different rewards, being able to pursue your goals through their ends. I think it's a wonderful school for life. I agree. And going back to the professional side, you're a member of the National Academy of Engineering, and of course a very prestigious body. And how did that change your professional life? Did it increase your leverage in the profession, or what has been the most important thing that being part of the NAE has given you?
It's a tremendous honor, and it's given me humility, I think is what I would say. When you meet the other people who are also members of the National Academy of Engineering, it's overwhelming to be included with those people. So I'm just very grateful that I've had so many mentors and so many people that have guided me along the way to get me to the point where I could be a part of the National Academy of Engineering. It has allowed me to work on some really interesting projects. The NAE is basically Congress's engineer. So when something happens, like recently the giant radio telescope in Puerto Rico collapsed, Arecibo. And I was part of a panel that investigated how did that happen and why did it happen and what we could learn from it. So it's given me opportunities to work on very high profile, very interesting, challenging projects.
I can see that learning is a big thing for you. I think that many engineers, we love learning, and any opportunity to do that is welcome. Yeah.
Yes.
Let us explore a little bit your work and your research and so on. And you have a close relationship with hurricanes. Those seems like dangerous fellows to be in company with. How did you come interested in hurricanes and their effects? And what have you done related to that field?
Yeah, hurricanes are amazing. The amount of energy, the force, the beauty of those natural events is incredible, and they can have a significant impact on people. I first got involved in hurricanes when I was a graduate student at the University of Illinois. My advisor, Professor Wilson Tang, had a project with the American Petroleum Institute. They were updating the API recommended practice to a reliability-based design approach, and he had a contract with them, and I worked with him as an undergraduate first and then a graduate student on that project, and that led me to understand hurricanes in an intellectual way, just because the main force that we're trying to withstand with offshore structures is the winds and the waves and the currents from hurricanes. And the uncertainty and the variability in hurricanes is why it's a reliability-based design. It's not a certain design. We're not sure they're going to survive because we can't imagine what might happen. So balancing the conservatism so that it's more likely than not to do okay, but also accepting that there is some risk that they're willing to accept, because it would cost a lot more money to not have that risk. If we really didn't want any risk, then we just wouldn't produce energy offshore. So that balance is really important. But then in 1992, Hurricane Andrew came through the Gulf of Mexico and impacted a lot of the structures that we were working on the design recommended practice for. So now it was no longer an intellectual exercise, it was real. We had real structures that failed in that storm. We had structures that we expected to survive that did not. We had structures that we expected to fail that did not. And so there was an opportunity to learn. And to this day, in fact, tomorrow, I'm attending a meeting where we're still working on what we learned from Hurricane Andrew and then subsequently Hurricane Ivan in 2004, Katrina in 2005, and Ike in 2008. Those are 4 storms that all produced waves that were exceeding the design standards for structures in the Gulf of Mexico and have allowed us to learn a tremendous amount and improve our design practice because every one of them showed us something new that we've then been able to take and translate into the way we build and design these structures. And it's not just for the Gulf of Mexico, but it's throughout the world.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So what would you say is the single most important thing, if you could summarize, that you learned about the design process? Because as you said, structures that one would expect to fail don't, while with others is the opposite. So what would you say is the most important thing learned through this process about the design process and what to do about it?
Yeah, to me the most important thing is that things can go wrong. Mm-hmm. That just because you used all the design checks with load factors and resistance factors and material factors and factors of safety, and you used 100-year or 500-year or 1,000-year loads, that doesn't mean that it's going to be okay. What I've learned is to go beyond whatever the design code requires and think through what happens if this gets loaded beyond what I've designed it for. Can I design this so that it fails in a graceful way and not in a catastrophic way? Mm-hmm. That thinking, and particularly in Hurricane Katrina onshore, where 2,000 people lost their lives, has really been important to me, that we need to think through not just how do we minimize it so that something goes wrong, but also if something does go wrong, how do we make it so that it's not as consequential? That idea is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I wanted to ask you about Katrina, and I think one of the things that you have remarked about it is the importance of people, and you already said that. And what was the experience of working, because you were in the ASC panel which did the forensic engineering on levee failure. Can you tell us a little bit about that, a little bit more about that experience?
Yeah. I was there on Thursday meeting with the Department of Interior about structures that had been loaded in the Gulf of Mexico in 2004 by Hurricane Ivan. In fact, on Friday, we were supposed to go offshore to view one of those structures. And Thursday evening, we ended up canceling our trip offshore because this Hurricane Katrina, had made its way into the Gulf of Mexico and was starting to turn north, and they were starting to think it might come toward the New Orleans area. So on Thursday, I went to lunch with 3 people, all of whom the following Monday lost their homes in Hurricane Katrina. So Katrina was a personal event for me. I would also say before Hurricane Katrina, I did spend a lot of time in New Orleans because I did a lot of work with the offshore oil and gas industry, and I was never a huge fan of New Orleans. It was hot and it was humid and it was a bit decadent, and it just wasn't my favorite city. And after Katrina, when I got to know the people in the neighborhoods and I got to know the communities and I got to better understand their culture and the parades and the parties and just the people, it's one of my favorite cities in the world now. So I learned a lot again about people going through this. And why didn't people evacuate? Because we as engineers didn't do a good job of working with people and making sure they understood that this protection system really wasn't a protection system. It would provide some management of keeping water out for certain levels of storm surge, but if the storm surge was 5 feet over the tops of the walls and the levees, it wasn't designed for that. So we as engineers learned from that we need to do a better job of working with people and make sure that the people we're serving actually understand what we can and can't do and what our designs are intended to do.
Yes, I think it's important what you said. We have a very sad recent experience in Spain in last October with terrible flood, with mostly in Valencia, but also in other areas, with terrible loss of life, terrible damage to properties, and by the way, and I think I speak on behalf of everyone here in Café, entre, Caminos, my heart goes out to the good people of Valencia who suffered so much and who have another regions in Spain and who demonstrated so incredible stamina and determination and solidarity, working to bring, and are still working to bring their lives back to normal. And I think it's something that for engineers it's very important. We should feel for, because we are supposed to serve the public and help our fellow humans, and it's important, as you said, to keep in mind the human side of all of this. And so my question is, thinking about natural disasters and natural hazards, and of course that a field lends itself to reliability analysis and to a probabilistic treatment of the design because of the uncertainty in the actions. But I wanted to, once you have analyzed, I want to talk a little bit about what you do or what to do. And you can act on many different levels. You can work at the level of infrastructure, you can work at the level of policy, for example, through zoning, regulations, and so on. You can work in forecasting systems, you can work in warning systems. It's important also the emergency response, reconstruction after the effect, and of course, very important, the engagement of people who might be affected, their input, their engagement, and they recognize the problem and are in line with the view of the whole group of people who's trying to address that. So it's difficult to balance all these many things, and do you want to comment on that? It's a very difficult problem with multiple objectives and multiple venues of reaching the end. So is there a secret? Is there a glue that can, bind everything together and make it work better? Do you think is there something that you can comment in this regard?
Yeah, I think we as engineers are problem solvers, and you laid out all of the various aspects of the problem, and we need to work with others to solve those problems. So my expertise isn't in sociology and it's not in psychology, and I need to work with people who are experts in those areas if I want to have an evacuation effort be more successful. It was, of the 2,000 people who died in Hurricane Katrina, the vast majority of them were elderly people. So it wasn't some random subset of the population. Like, we know who are the most vulnerable. That's the problem that we as engineers can identify. But in order to solve that problem, I need to work with people who can work with that community and figure out how to allow them to evacuate, how to let them take their pets with them, how to make sure that where they're going to is nice and that they feel cared for and that they trust us. So I think the challenge is that we need to work with lots of other disciplines, economists and sociologists and psychologists and all sorts of, I can't be an expert in modeling hurricanes and an expert in geotechnical engineering and an expert in structural engineering. I need to work with all the other expertise in order to solve the kinds of problems that we're talking about.
Yes, and also you are saying that you need some humility You need to be humble and recognize the limits of our knowledge and what we can do, yes, and working with the group. I'm completely in agreement. So, changing a little bit the subject again, let's go to talk about academics and your academic leadership. You chair the Fariborz-Massey Department of Civil, Architectural and Environmental Engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. Tell us something about that, the more managerial side or leadership side of your profession. How is that?
Yeah, it's challenging. I'm glad that I've done it. I'm in my 8th year. I have one more year. It's a service to our students and to our faculty. It has been an opportunity to learn. I've appreciated the ability to have an impact in a bigger way than I can as an individual faculty member. I've been through the pandemic, which was a real challenging time for everybody, but a particularly challenging time for people in education to get our students through that time. I have been blessed in that we have an investor in our department, Fariborz-Massey, who has donated a significant amount of money to the University of Texas in order to allow us to prepare our students for the future of civil, architectural, and environmental engineering, which, while I don't know exactly what the future has in store, the one thing I can tell you is it's not going to look like it did for you and me. Yeah. I'm not sure our grandchildren are going to learn how to drive cars. The ways that we produce and use energy, water is so important and I think been a bit neglected. It's such a valuable resource. Without water, you don't have life. Mm-hmm. And I think the ability to make sure that we're able to provide water to everyone in difficult circumstances is going to be a real challenge for us as engineers going forward. And again, we're going to need to work with the computer scientists and the technologists and all of the other areas of engineering in order to solve these problems. So Fariborz-Massey's gift is giving us the opportunity to step back and think about our curriculum and how we try to prepare our students for this future that's going to look a lot different than it has for the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Yes, interesting. So, as part of this mission to prepare students for the future, it's a beautiful mission, by the way, very difficult, but beautiful. What would you say, what traits or what capabilities, what abilities other than say quantitative analysis, which is the typical realm of engineers, what other traits do you try to encourage or promote in your students?
Yeah, we've been thinking a lot about this, and we've come up with 6 of them. So one of them is integrated systems. We're trying to at least give our students some familiarity with systems thinking, mm-hmm. and our systems include both the infrastructure, but they also include the people that the infrastructure serves, so that makes it a really interesting system. I think we're going to need new materials and new processes, and so giving our students some familiarity with material science, more so than we have in the past, so that as new materials are developed or as we're looking to develop new materials, our students have the ability to participate in that. Data science, simulation, and decision making, and I'm going to emphasize the decision making aspect of that. The purpose of AI is not to create something fun or something that's interesting, it's to help us make better decisions. And so giving our students those tools is going to be really important so that they can make better decisions and they can help their clients and the public that they serve make better decisions. Engineering for the extreme. I think we're in a time where the pressures, the temperatures, the radiation levels, the types of environments that some of our engineering systems are going to be subjected to on Earth and extraterrestrially is going to require that our students at least have some sense of how to think about a problem like that. And the last one, I think, is the one that most people don't think about, but public affairs, public policy, and community engagement is something that we've, in this talk, talked a lot about, and I do think that's going to be something where our students need to at least have some exposure to that way of thinking in order to be successful and to be prepared for the future. And in each of those areas, it would be nice if our students had the opportunity to potentially go in depth. So we're trying to provide both a broad education so that all of our undergraduate and graduate students have some exposure to those topics. And I missed one, autonomous and smart systems is the other.
Okay.
I think we think of that in terms of transportation, but it's so much bigger than, I think all of our infrastructure systems are going to have aspects of autonomous and smart systems with them. So we want to make sure our students are exposed and have the opportunity to go deep in some of those areas. And that's going to require us to reach out. We're not experts in public affairs, but at the University of Texas at Austin, we have the LBJ School of Public Affairs. We're not experts in material science, but we have a very strong Texas Materials Science Institute. So reaching out and again, going back to, we're just engineers solving problems. The kinds of problems we solve have to do with the natural and built environments that support civilization, but we need computer scientists and mechanical engineers and chemical engineers and electrical and computer engineers and everyone else to help us solve those problems. So that's what we're trying to do. Can we do that in a 4-year degree? And can we break down some of those barriers across just the university and working with other disciplines? I don't know, but we're going to try.
It's a good program. In particular about AI, and of course we need to talk about AI if briefly. In your field, have you seen any development in AI that you think it's very interesting or worth mentioning?
Yeah, I think in geotechnical engineering, we have always realized the importance of what we call judgment. The materials we're dealing with are not engineered materials, it's nature. And so we can't really predict exactly what's going to be in the ground until we get into the ground and see. And no matter how many borings or probes or non-destructive means we use to try to characterize what's in the ground, every project I've worked on, we've been surprised by something and sometimes been surprised by a lot of things that we found when we actually got into the ground. So, judgment is really just experience, and experience you get mostly from failure because you worked on projects where it didn't work out and you realized, wow, the next time I'm in a place where there might be boulders, I need to think through how am I going to drive piles through boulders if I encounter them. But that judgment, waiting for every engineer to graduate and work on a bunch of projects and go through a bunch of failures in order to get that judgment is a pretty big expense. I think AI has the opportunity to bring to bear all of the experience from past projects to allow our engineers, to allow me as an engineer to do better on the next project. So are we there? No, but I think that's where the real opportunity is going to be. I think with data management, we have lots of, in my world, geotechnical data, and doing a better job of using the data we have from previous projects to help us on new projects is going to be important. But the thing I'm always cautioning of about anything, whether you call it AI or not, it's still based on whatever data you gave it to train. So if that didn't include the thing that you're now going to find on your new project, you're going to miss it. And there's always going to be the need for us as engineers to be humble and realize there's so much that we don't know. And I do wish with AI there was more of an emphasis on uncertainty and quantifying and managing that uncertainty. But right now it seems like everyone wants just to focus on the predicting things, not qualifying those predictions.
Yes, uncertainty is certainly it's a fact of life, and I think it will never go away. And I think one of the issues is that we humans don't think too well about probabilities. Would you agree? I think from an evolutionary standpoint, we have developed to think in terms of yes, no. But you need to know whether you need to run, before a predator or not, hiding in the woods, and there's no time to say no. I'll run with a 26% probability. So what do you think, being an expert in reliability analysis and so on, how do you convey the importance of reliability analysis and probabilistic thinking to, for example, associates, clients, collaborators, and so on?
Yeah, I don't focus on the probability part of it. The probability is a means to an end, and the end is decision making. So whether you feel comfortable assessing the probability or not of something, you are trying to make a decision, and even not making a decision is making a decision. So if you put it in that light, I think it helps people understand that they're trying to assess something in order to make a rational decision. And maybe as individuals, we don't need to always make rational decisions, but as engineers, we need to make sure that we are making and that our clients are making rational decisions. So it's required. Whether you have a lot of data or you don't have a lot of data, at the end of the day, we somehow need to provide a means to make a decision, and probability gives us that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yes, and going back to AI and its help in decision making and the shortcomings in the training data that you mentioned, what plans do you have in the department to bring that into the curriculum, in particular about AI? I'm sure you're thinking what to implement and what to do.
Yeah, we have right now a data science course. We're looking at adding an additional data science course. We have a number of technical electives where we've already introduced AI. We're looking at having the idea of data science and simulation and ultimately decision making thread throughout our curriculum. So it's not just a course that you were exposed to it in, but you're always making use of these tools as you make your way through the curriculum. And we have all sorts of cool things. One of our faculty members is training AI to do the physics of really complicated problems like pouring sand. You don't think of that as a very complicated problem, but if you actually imagine all of these billions of sand grains that are irregularly shaped, interacting with one another as you're dynamically pouring them onto a table. It's a really complicated problem if you were going to go down to the fundamental level and solve the physics. So using the physics at a fundamental level on an individual particle and then using AI to upscale that and train the system to be able to predict what happens when you pour sand is something that one of our faculty members, Krishna Kumar, is working on. And that's a really cool idea that we're seeing that with hurricane modeling as well. The most recent hurricanes, the predictive models that are based on machine learning are doing better than the purely physics-based models because they're capturing things that we don't quite understand are important, or they're not captured in our simplified numerical models that are playing a role and are allowing us to make a better prediction. So I think the world's exciting, the future of the things that we can do with AI, and I think our students need to know how to do that and also how to do that thoughtfully and understand that, again, it's always going to be limited by whatever data you use to train that system.
Yes, I think it's interesting that it's a little baffling for engineers because we like to have causal models where we know why things are happening, but it's a fact that AI models are sometimes better than causal, physically based models. And I think the only advantage of the causal models is their sparsity, that they're more parsimonious, they have less parameters and so on, but it's something that we need to integrate into the portfolio of solutions as engineers. So I think it's very good that UT and your department is moving along those lines. And one thing that is, of course, what you mentioned brings prompts a lot of questions from my side related to research and innovation and so on. But one way to being exposed, of course, to different ideas, as you said, part of the education and acquiring judgment is the having been in different environments and seen many different problems and so on. How would you say the international experience is part of? Is that an important part nowadays of with globalization? Is part of an engineer's education?
Very much so. Even more so today than it was yesterday. Yes, I think, and thank you to UPM for hosting my visit and for hosting this conversation. It's a pleasure to be here. We're trying to organize programs where our students are going to be exchanging between the University of Texas at Austin and UPM in Madrid. In fact, the first student from UT Austin gets here on June 21st, so not very far.
Congratulations.
In the future from now, yes. And I think it's really important. It gets back to the importance of people in what we do as civil, architectural, and environmental engineers. And understanding people means understanding people, which means the cultures and the environments and all of the various aspects of people. And the only way to get that kind of understanding is to go around the world and interact with different people. So giving our students some exposure to that, I think, is going to be really important. You know, there's a saying that governments come and go, but the church and universities are still going to be there. I think we're in a time right now where there's a lot of tension, and I'm not sure that governments are going to look quite the same in the future as what they have for at least the last 60 or 70 years. So I think it's important for us as people, and for me as an engineer, and for our students as future engineers, to get out and experience the whole world, because we're all in this together. And these boundaries, if you look at the United States of America, the boundary between the United States of America and Mexico doesn't exist. If you're walking along, you would have no idea. It's something that we, the people, made up, and that means that can go away in an instant. So I think our students are going to really need to be aware of and appreciative of everyone in the world for us to be successful going forward.
And from the viewpoint, from what you know about Caminos, UPM, and how would you say that, for example, an institution like UT and your department and an institution like Caminos, UPM can supplement each other or complement? What do you see as maybe the things that either side can bring to the table to be more useful to society and their students?
Yeah, well, you know, we have a lot of synergy because we both are very strongly grounded in practice and in the real world and in producing engineers who can go out and practice, who can build and design bridges, who can design and build tunnels, who can do really difficult things, who feel like even if they didn't have a class in that, they had experiences that give them the ability to learn what they're going to need to learn, to be resilient when things don't quite go the way they thought they were going to go, and to double down and stick with it and be persistent and be patient. And all of those traits, I think both of our universities are known around the world for producing graduates who have those traits. So I think there's a lot of synergy between the two universities, and we're both highly regarded. So if we decide that we think that our future students need to be grounded a little bit better in public affairs, that's not just about our students, but we're sending a message to our peers around the world that they better be thinking about exposing their students as well to public affairs. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Good, yes. And you know, some of the things that you mentioned, let me ask a little bit about innovation. And you asked, and research, you asked about both universities being, you know, very grounded in actual practice. Of course, for actual practice, you need, for good practice, you need good science, and you need good basic science. And I know the University of Texas is very active in both types of innovation, the most business ready or less disruptive and more with immediate application, and the more basic, long-term, and so on. And what do you think is the role of both, and how do you balance both types of research? Because I know UT, for example, is present at both levels.
Yeah, I think one way is you have a lot of people. So you need people who are focusing on more of the fundamental science and people who are focusing on more of the practical application, and you need them working together. I think we need the support of industry, so we haven't talked about Ferrovial yet, but we need to talk about Ferrovial. In many ways, I'm here because of Ferrovial, and so are you. And that's a constant between the University of Texas at Austin, where Ferrovial has their U.S. headquarters, and UPM here in Madrid. And industry working with our researchers is really important because our researchers need to understand what's needed. Where are there opportunities to actually help out in the real world? And industry needs to understand what are the fundamental advancements that we're making that they might be able to utilize in the real world. So that goes both ways. And I think us as I'll just speak for myself as a faculty member, much of my research is driven by practice. But when I see something in practice and I realize that maybe we came up with a workaround for that particular problem, but we really didn't understand something fundamentally, that motivates me to then go to the more fundamental side and see if I can better understand what's happening here and how do we approach that type of problem in a stronger way than just figuring out some kind of a workaround in a practical solution. So it helps me. I do both. I kind of go back and forth, and sometimes I'm more focused on practical problems, and sometimes I'm more focused on more fundamental problems, and it's one of the great things about being a professor. I get to do that. Yes. So I'm very lucky. Yes.
No, I think it's important because you need good engineering is based in good science, and you need to have good grounding. So when you identify something that is missing, when you identify a gap, I think that's a very good suggestion. It prompts you to go into more basic type of research, so that's interesting. And how do you engage public agencies and private parties, you know, private companies and so on, into research collaboration? What is the secret ingredient for that, if there is one?
People.
Okay.
It's all about people.
Yes.
Yeah, in most cases, even in the most competitive federal agency research competitions, it's still about people. Do you have the right people on your team? Do you know the people who are going to be supporting that research? Do those people trust you that you're going to follow through on what it is that you say you're going to be able to do? So I think those relationships are so important and will always be important.
Yes. Okay. So talking about fundamentals and basic science and so on, you talked about the 7 principles that you are working to incorporate in the curriculum. Is there anything else that we have left out of the conversations that you think it's important for the training of engineers and the future of engineering?
I do. I believe that fundamental underpinning of many of those competencies that we're thinking are important, such as materials, is going to be biology. I think that's where new materials are going to come from, whether they're inspired by or they're actually utilizing biological processes. I think the thinking of integrated systems, we really need to understand biological systems to help us in developing that perspective. And I think that if we just look at the future, the big evolution that's happening right now, I don't think we are always aware of where the big jumps are coming, like in the early 1900s in physics around electromagnetism and radiation and the model of the atom and relativity. In a very short amount of time, our understanding of physics changed pretty dramatically. I think that's happening right now in biology. So what you and I probably learned in biology was a lot of memorizing things. At least that's the way I remember it. It was all these classifications and names for things and organizations to understand everything. But I think we're getting to a much more fundamental understanding now of biology, and we the engineers are going to need to be aware of that and be able to leverage that. So that's something as well we're looking at for our students and our research. One of our newest faculty members actually is from Spain. Professor Alexandra Saracho is working on biological inspired processes to improve ground. So I think there's going to be a lot of that kind of work going forward.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point. And in fact, if you think about the whole idea of neural networks, is inspired by biology or genetic algorithms in optimization problems. So yes, I think we're going, and also as you said, there's a fundamental difference that biology knowledge has got to the point where it allows us to act. It's not just knowing and classifying and observing, but it allows you to act and maybe apply that knowledge to other areas. So I think that's a very good point. And so maybe let me move to the last three final questions. And so who inspires you in your daily life, or what? What is your main inspiration in your daily life at a personal level and professional level?
Yeah, my wife. My wife is Lizanne Gilbert. She's an engineer. She builds tunnels. She works as a contractor. She works on incredibly challenging problems that have incredibly challenging issues with people, and does a wonderful job of it. And she's a great partner for me and a great friend. She did both of the Ironmen with me. And she's been a wonderful mother to our 4 children. And she's what keeps me going.
Good. You know that I always come from the contracting side, so I know a lot about that. And tunneling work is very difficult. Underground construction is extremely difficult. Yes, that's right. And in your professional career, other than your wife, who has been a role model to you?
I have a lot. So when I first went to work for Golder Associates, Richard Williams was the principal in charge of the Chicago office, and he was a great mentor for me. He was very bright and very creative and a very strong engineer, but he also had a great way of solving problems quickly and getting pretty close to the right answer without sitting there and working out a bunch of math in order to get there. And he would call it skating, but I would call it brilliance. It was a wonderful way about how he interacted with the clients that we were serving that I learned and has served me well throughout my career. And I've had every place along the way, from my elementary school through high school teachers to my professors to the people I've worked with, the people on the faculty who I work with. I'm constantly inspired by and motivated by and fascinated by and am learning from all the people around me. So it's hard for me to pick a particular.
It's more a team effort.
Yes.
It's people.
It's very much a team
good people.
effort.
Yes, you're right. You're right. And what would you say to a young engineer starting their career? What would be your advice to them? What would you say to them?
To have fun, to enjoy. They've been put in a pretty important role as an engineer, and enjoy that status, and be responsible with that status, and be humble, and be gracious. Things don't always go the way we want them to go, but I think being patient and having grace for other people, and grace for willing to learn from the things that didn't go well, instead of just being frustrated by the things that didn't go well, are going to help them have a successful career.
Yes, it's good advice. They have the advantage that they have chosen a wonderful profession that, as you said, can be a lot of fun. And so thank you very much. I think we got to the end of our conversation. It was my pleasure, as always, to have this conversation with you, Bob, and I hope that you continue to do interesting things and have a lot of fun and practice sports and all the rest. So thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you very much, Fidel. It's been wonderful getting an opportunity to talk with you, and I look forward to flipping this around sometime so I can learn more about you.
Thank you.
Thank you.